Well, welcome back here to Community Focus here on Channel 6 TV. Kenny Fogle here with you. We've got Jack Kelly here with us. Jack's been around Bardstown for a number of years, I say. I'm not going to go into how long.
All my life.
All your life. And Jack, first of all, appreciate you coming on today.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me.
And one of the things I want to talk about is early Bardstown. That's the number one thing I like to talk about.
Early Bardstown?
Early Bardstown, early Salem, whatever we want to call it. And I know we want to talk particularly the Talbot Tavern because you have an interest in the Talbot Tavern.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about early Bardstown and how far back. I know some people say 1780s when Bardstown was discovered. Some people actually say it may go back even further than that.
1780 is when they issued a warrant that was retroactive, but you've got to go to the certificate book and the testimony before the Virginia Land Commission. Mm-hmm. And the Virginia Land Commission on page 162, the excerpts from the testimony was that David Bard came to Bardstown and that he built a cabin that became kind of a trading post called Bard's Cedar Cabin and laid out the town. Now, that's the most authentic document that they have, and that is the only one that they have that will show any place in Kentucky prior to October 1779 is registered in that book. Mm-hmm. Now, then John Wycliffe, an early Bardstonian, in his paper states that in the fall of 1775 and the first part of 76, there were 5 people that moved in to settle Bardstown. Yeah. And that was Ben Grayson, Proctor Knott, Isaac Morrison, Gabriel Cox, and Walter Beale. Now, what occurred was that it was a very ambitious thing that the Bard boys did. Mm-hmm. They laid out on 100 acres, 126 lot town. Very ambitious. Uh-huh. But the unfortunate thing about it was that the Revolutionary War started, and that cut off the migration into Kentucky, and it did not reoccur until 1778. Now, to show the 1780 spoke retroactively rather than the future. One of the two things that most people don't have is that Dr. George Hart, the first physician in Kentucky, and of course Harrodsburg has it big time, mm-hmm. but his home settlement was adjoining Bardstown in 1777. Mm-hmm. In fact, where the cemetery is out there, his acreage was on the north side of town, and adjoining him on the east and went all the way over and included Wickland was William and Frances Jane Coombs. She was the first teacher in Kentucky. But what occurred was they went to, when the war started and the migration didn't come into Bardstown as they anticipated, they both went temporarily to Harrodsburg, but came back to Bardstown.
So there's a good chance that Bardstown is actually older than Harrodsburg then. And Harrodsburg's supposed to be the oldest.
No, it's not older than Harrodsburg. It's Harrod got there in 74.
Okay.
And was a much and more people, and he built a fort. Bardstown did not have a fort. Now, you have to delve a little bit about the history. Prior to October 1774, of course, the British were in charge, mm-hmm. and they had a treaty with the Shawnee that they would not colonize Kentucky. In other words, there was no colonization of Kentucky prior to October 1774, and that's when they made a treaty at the end of what's called the Dunsmore War. Mm-hmm. And in that treaty, that's when they changed it where they could colonize Kentucky. So there really was no there may have been some hunters and passed through here, but there was no
Yeah.
colonization of Kentucky until the latter part of 74. Now, we don't know just when David and his brothers, William and Richard, got here, but it is believed that William, who was a surveyor or kind of self-taught surveyor, did do some survey work in 74 with a fellow named Stewart. They did some map making in 74.
Mm-hmm.
He might have been here at that time. And of course, what the testimony was in 75 that he had completed his cabin and everything. It may have. We have nothing other than the best document was that in 1775 is when he was here and when it was
What
done.
did Bardstown look like back then? Is it just woods or hills?
I would assume it was just woods there, and they laid it off, but they didn't clear the streets and things. I would assume that, and I don't know whether, but there are two sources that I have later on that stated that these guys petitioned for a village, and they used the name Salem, and it was called Salem up until about 1782, somewhere along in that time. Now the Talbot Tavern, some of the detractors state that it couldn't be 79 because Bardstown didn't start to 1780, which is incorrect. It started in 75. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one and only document states that.
And we were part of Virginia then. I mean, yes, there was no such thing as Kentucky in 79.
No, it's in the Land Commission of Virginia. You've got to look in Virginia to find that. Now, there was a stonemason, John Cape is his name. He built 4 stone buildings in Bardstown. The Talbot Tavern, Lewis's Tavern, the Hines House, and the courthouse, the old courthouse.
Yeah.
We know that he built the second one in 1782 because there was a court case involving it. Now, the tavern then was first, and it was estimated that it took about 1.5 to 2 years to build those.
Yeah.
It took over 3 years to build the courthouse. And he had been a captain in the Pennsylvania militia and fought for 2-year enlistment, and he got out in 1778, and then in the next year, Andrew Hines, I think it was the fellow that probably got him to Bardstown to build these cabins. There and the tavern being the first had to be started in 1779.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the tavern. That's had a lot of famous people come through the tavern. I know Daniel Boone, Abraham Lincoln. Who am I missing?
There was Daniel Boone. What they did was they had a lawsuit, a lot of lawsuits involving property. The thing was all messed up. And Jim Harrod, the founder of Harrodsburg, had a lawsuit over property. They changed the venue. In other words, they didn't want to try it because he was so popular there in Mercer County. So they moved the case here to Nelson County. And there is a subpoena that Boone was subpoenaed to give his deposition here in Bardstown about April, I think it's about April 1792, somewhere along in there. And the trial never took place because a few months after Boone gave his deposition, Harrod was killed by Indians. The other thing that I think that Bardstown doesn't go on is the Lincoln heritage that is here in Bardstown. We have put plaques on the wall of the history, It differs somewhat from some of the others,
Yeah.
but it's ours. It's the Lincoln heritage. The Lincoln family was involved in a lawsuit over land. This land was down by the Green River, which at this time was part of Nelson County. And they put it off, and they had the trial. I don't have the date, but I know it was in October of 1813 from the.
I think the guy's name was John Reed, because I think he's one of my wife's ancestors.
Well, what occurred was Lincoln, and it was Abraham Lincoln, that's the grandfather of the president, and he had a warrant for some land down by Green River, and what he did, he engaged orally Reed to go down to survey it, plot it over for a certain amount of it. And for Reed to go down there, he had to have the warrant. So apparently Lincoln gave him the warrant, and then Lincoln died. Well, then Reed died, and none of it was in writing. So they had the trial there, or the hearing, whatever it was, and the Lincolns lost.
Yeah.
And you can always say, well, suppose they had won. Abraham
You probably never been president. That's right.
might have been a Kentucky farmer.
That's right. Exactly right. So my wife's great grandfather actually did us a favor there by beating Lincoln. But well, you had other people too. I know Henry Clay was somebody that came by on occasion.
Came through there. The one that we go on is King Louis Philippe. King Louis Philippe and his two brothers, Prince Beaujolais and Prince de Montpensier. The Prince Montpensier was an artist. Now, there's some question. He stayed in the inn of Jacob Bean. Now, was Jacob Bean running the tavern because the Hines who owned it didn't run it, they had hired it out.
Yeah.
We don't really know. That's a question. Yeah. Legend has it was at the tavern. And then the legend has it that the murals were painted by his brother. Now, we've had the murals looked at before we had the fire. Two ladies from the Chicago Museum of Art looked at it, and from the pigment that was used, they said that the only thing they can tell us was the murals predated 1820. So we know it was back there then. There was a guy who claimed to be a professor of art from Oxford in London, England. He came over, and he said that they were the princes because he leaves a monogram or something on there, and it was there. Then we've had two other different people say, no way it could be.
That's a beautiful thing about history.
Because it is, the paintings are too crude for his thing.
Well, you know it's Kentucky.
And they may not have been here that long. See, the problem with it is that King Philippe kept a journal. The only trouble is his journal stops at Bardstown.
The Talbot Tavern was a stagecoach stop, I guess. At that
point. Yeah, it was stagecoach.
From what I read, is people they'd stay there whether there's a room available or not. They just scattered all over the place.
What you did when it was originally built, it was only that stone part in the northeast corner, and upstairs you had a thing upstairs. There were two rooms. One for the women and one for the men. And then later it was expanded and into private rooms.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about the building here, we have there the building, the stonework is called a Flemish bond stone. Now, the brick is easy, you can see, because if you look at it, you have a long side and a short side right in the middle, and it's thing.
Yeah.
That's a decorative type. You can see how they could do it with brick. And if you'll note, most of the old houses, brick houses in Bardstown, has that decorative on the front side where you see it, and it's very prevalent. But to do stonework, you had to go quarry that stone to specifications, and it was a laborious thing. Then on the two sides that faced the road outside is where the part is, and then they faced it with chisel marks to do it. There are between 150 and 250 chisel marks in each stone in the tavern on the facade there. And what we say is that the American Dry Stone Institute states it's an extremely rare and a great example of that type of work. We have also, when we tell about it in there, we put there, as far as we know, it is the only public building still left in America with the Flemish bond. And we say, if you find another one, let us know. There are some houses. There's a house at Hallsville, one in Nashville, and one in the Shenandoah Valley that these people knew of. But they know of no other public buildings still in existence on it. Of course, one notable there that we have in there is Anton Philipp Heinrich, who came here. He was a concert violinist, and he came to Kentucky, and on the way over he lost his wife, and he actually walked from New York here, and he got a ragtag band up and went up to Lexington and played Beethoven's Fifth Symphony up here. But he was staying out at the Speed place, which is Cottage Grove, that there north of town. His first music that he ever composed, his first music was played there at the tavern for the memory of the men lost from Bardstown in the Battle of Frenchman's Bend in 1812. We have a copy of the sheet stating that. He went on to start writing music then. And in Prague in 1822, they had a concert there. They had 4 by Anton Philipp Heinrich and 4 by Bach, by Johann. And both artists were in the. And he comes back to America, and he was the founder of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra.
That is fantastic. Well, how much, before we get out of here, how much was lost in the fire? Were you able to preserve quite a bit from the fire?
The old part, the only thing we lost in the old part was the roof. We still have the original floors, original walls, and everything there. That's what the biggest thing we lost were the roof. Because they couldn't burn those stone walls.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that everybody asks about the tavern. Did Jesse James shoot a hole in the wall?
Well, we have our, and in the midst of getting that Jesse James room, most people do not realize how much Jesse James was here in this area. In 1881, a short time before Jesse died, an investigative reporter for a St. Louis paper came here, and he wrote an article there saying, much to the embarrassment of the law enforcement in multi-states, they were never able to apprehend Jesse James. Had they have gone to Louisville and traveled 35 miles south, they would be at the heart of Jesse's hideout. He had 2 hideouts, one in the area towards over on the river. He called it the Chaplain Hills on the Chaplain River, and one out to Samuels. And this area was his hideout. I mean, the main hideout, not the only one, main hideout between his escapades. Now, his buddy who he rode with, Donnie Pence, was a sheriff here, and Pence credited Frank James with saving his life. And he could come and go.
Yeah.
And see, there were no pictures at that time, and the people in Bardstown didn't know him, so he had free reign to come and go here. And so more Pence, that's another deal now. Pence is the one who made the statement later on that he played cards there. Later, they had after Frank got pardon, and amnesty and everything, he came back and he played there quite a bit, and quite a bit of the old men knew Frank and had met him there, one being my grandfather. And Donnie Pence, I mean, it was, common knowledge from Pence and several others who played there. I mean, wasn't any question about it.
Yeah.
And I can verify it was old knowledge back there 75 years ago. And that's what my father and grandfather, my grandfather was a good friend of Pence. He was a pallbearer at his funeral. And so I don't think there's any question but that he was here all of the, see, he came to Samuels because his stepfather, Reuben Samuels, who really raised Frank and Jesse, was related to the people at Samuels Depot. That's Bill Samuels and that group. And Pence married one of the Samuels girls there. So, I mean, there's too much there with see, Quantrell, and you tell people, well, Quantrell was killed, right on the other side of Bloomfield.
Around Fairfield area, I think,
over at Wakefield. And then 15 to 20 of the people left at Quantrell's Raiders surrendered and got their amnesty at Samuels Depot. You're aware of that, I'm sure, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So, his situation here, I think it's very credible that he
you got a very rich history at Talbot Tavern anyway. So you got a very rich history at Talbot Tavern.
Right. So I think it's very highly credible that he did so. And one of the things on our Lincoln Heritage statement that we gather not only just the tavern, but also some parts of it to lead up to it, like up to the Lincoln thing there. I like to show a order where John Caldwell was appointed administrator of the state of Abraham Lincoln. You got to do a double take. That's his grandfather.
Well, we do appreciate you being here today. We might get back on and do some more of this sometime. So,
all righty.
I thank you for being here, and tell us, keep it to about the Talbot Tavern in early Bardstown.
Right.
All right. Well, Jack Kelly here with us today. We do appreciate you tuning in. Hope you learned a little bit. Come visit Talbot Tavern again. It's in Bardstown, downtown, right on the Court Square, and a lot of history there. And Jack, you may be there and greet them sometime. So.
Right. Can I tell you one more thing?
One more thing.
They had a shootout in downtown Bardstown. And one of the desperados was killed. It started there at the guy who worked for John Talbot's tailor shop was telling about groom. There were three of them, two Merrills and Sam Ford, went there and robbed the place, and they had a shootout coming out. And I just want to tell you, it was at John Talbot's tailor shop. That was my great-grandfather on my mother's side. One of the desperados that they caught went to trial, and they appointed a young lawyer, John S. Kelly, my grandfather, to defend him.
You've been here a long time. Well, stick around. Got a lot more to come on Community Focus. Kenny Fogel, Jack Kelly here with us. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll be right back. Thank you a lot.